You need to think that the camera is there, yeah? It's not there.
Hello?
Benedict Cumberbatch.
I think we are live. I think we're live.
Hello.
Hello, YouTube. Hello, internets. This is James Kersbrook, aka the Intrepid Wino here. And if you can actually see this, welcome to the first ever live streaming Let's Taste video. Being joined today by my friend James Dossan, who's a sommelier, and we're going to be tasting some Australian Grenache. Hopefully everyone's used the links okay. Honestly, this is a test run, so I'm not sure how this is going. It's kind of a crazy concept to do live online wine tastings. So hopefully people can actually get on board. Don't forget, during the whole broadcast, you can send me messages or tweet, Instagram, Facebook, whatever. If you're using social media, make sure to use the hashtag Let's Taste. So that I can actually see it as it comes through, ask questions, make comments, whatever you want. Before I introduce James, first I just want to acknowledge my supporters for this episode. Excuse me. Firstly, Different Drop, online wine retailer based up in Sydney, who sell really fantastic, innovative, mostly sustainably grown wines made in Australia. They work with a lot of really exciting, dynamic, small producers from a lot of regions around Australia. If you go to differentdrop.com, you'll find a huge range. You can even pick a mixed pack of wines. Is that coming through? Oh, cool. You can put together your own mixed pack, or you can buy a mixed pack. You can even buy the wines we're tasting here. If you look for the Let's Taste Grenache pack, while stocks last, you can actually buy this and taste the wines yourself. So if you do go to Different Drop, make sure you are using the code VINCASTVINO, VINCASTVINO, one word, at purchase. Your first order over $100, the guys at Different Drop will give you $25 off. So, of course, thank you, Different Drop, for providing the wines today. My other supporter I would like to acknowledge is a new one. It's Plum Glassware. Plum is an Australian brand that were designed here in Australia, but they are made in Europe. Fine crystal. They basically did a lot of research about shapes of glassware and the different kind of wines you can have, different varieties, different sort of structures, styles of wines. And they have simplified everything back. They found that you really only need a couple of shapes. So they've got two shapes of red wine glass, red A and red B, two white A and white B, and one flute. So if you go to plum.com, you can find out all about those kind of glasses. They're really well made. They have different ranges. They even have outdoor ranges, which are perfect for if you're having a picnic and you're taking a nice bottle of wine, you want to enjoy it. You still want to appreciate the subtleties of the wine, because shape of the glass can quite dramatically impact the enjoyment of the wine. And so Plum have done the research. They have got some lovely decanters as well. And so, yeah, thank you very much, Plum, for providing the glasses for today's tasting and all future episodes of Let's Taste. So, got through that. If you are online, let me know that you're watching this. I'm not sure I can see anyone coming through or not. Anyway, we may as well get started. Move on. James Dossan is my guest for the first live streaming Let's Taste. A sommelier for many, many years, has been worked in Sydney, in Melbourne, a number of different venues, and has just started at the newly opened ESP, or Estelle by Scott Pickett, here in Melbourne and Northcote. And so he is very knowledgeable about varieties, regions. You may have heard him on previous episodes of my podcast, The Vincast. We did a tasting on one of the episodes of
Grenache in Australia, yeah.
And so that was kind of the kernel that became what's the saying? The acorn that became the tree. That is, Let's Taste. So that was a fantastic experience, and I thought, who better to have on the first episode than James. So thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for letting me be here. It's been it's good. I feel like a guinea pig, sort of in a little fish tank, running on the that sort of little spiral thing. But anyway, it's good. Let's get through these wines and we'll have a little bit of a chat.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about Grenache. It is one of the most widely planted grape varieties in the world, particularly in Europe, and you find it in a lot of different regions. What are some of the regions that are probably most associated with Grenache, do you think?
Southern Rhone, definitely.
Southern Rhone Valley in
Southern
France.
Rhone Valley in France.
Yep.
You know, that is quintessentially Grenache there, and it is used as blending material, but it does constitute the majority of the blend in the Southern Rhone. We also have some sweet wine made out of Grenache, especially from the sort of Languedoc-Roussillon area, and then we've got Grenache in Catalonia in Spain, especially in the Priorat area in Monstant, DOs, and some rosé made in Navarra. So and then of course Sardinia.
Yes, Sardinia in Italy.
In Italy,
where it actually has a different name, Cannonau.
Cannonau.
It has kind of started to creep into other parts of Italy as well. You find a little bit in Tuscany, where for some reason they call it Alicante, the Spanish, one of the Spanish names.
Yep.
Grenache has a lot of different names as well, so it has they're more like synonyms really. But I think one of the most important things about Grenache, particularly in what we would consider the old world in Europe, is that Grenache is almost never on its own. It's always blended.
It's always blended. That's right. Yeah.
So even like with rosé wines, like in Provence, you're going to have some Sanso and some Mourvedre sometimes. In Châteauneuf de Papps, of course,
we've got
a huge range of
18 or 17 other varieties that,
that
can be blended with it.
It's quite different to Syrah or Shiraz, where Syrah is quite commonly on its own. Grenache is almost always blended in the old world.
Yep.
So Grenache, as far as Europe, stylistically, can be quite different.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we see. If you've got to understand the actual vine. So we look at. It is a thin-skinned variety. Buds generally early, but is a very late ripening variety and requires a lot of heat. It's a variety that can sort of take well to a little bit of water stress as well. But what it generally produces is lighter. Lighter red when you compare it to, say, with Cabernet Sauvignon or Shiraz. It definitely has a much more spicier nature. It's not as deep in color, but it has a tendency to produce high alcohol levels. If you are inclined to make the wine in that way, but definitely the old world styles, as we start to see, some ripe fruit, but at the same time, when you blend it with the other material, it does, give some lovely structure to the wine. It is generally a little bit lower in tannins, Grenache on its own, especially from some younger vines, is quite energetic and maybe a little bit more plusher fruit characteristics, but. And then in the new world, we see, really ripe examples of it. And
let's talk about the new world, because Grenache has been one of the varieties that has sort of spread around the world, and there are a number of kind of key areas in the world outside of Europe where there sorry about the noise, where there are there's a lot of Grenache planted.
Yeah, obviously the first one that comes to mind is in Australia, but we especially in South Australia, the Barossa Valley, McLaren Vale.
We'll come back to Australia,
but we're now seeing some plantings, relatively good plantings in the sort of central coast of California, around that sort of San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara counties, especially in the Paso Robles, AVA. So we're seeing, a lot of, but these are more sort of, Rhone Valley styled wines.
Yeah.
With Grenache being the dominated blend.
But
I
I think it's
there is some
important.
plantings in South America, but I haven't really seen much of those around.
Well, certainly in my travels, when I was in sort of South America, in Chile and Argentina, probably more so in like Mendoza in Argentina, that quite semi-arid, fairly warm, very continental climate, I thought, why isn't there more Grenache? You know, obviously Malbec is the big variety planted in Mendoza, you know, and it sort of didn't really make sense to me considering that Argentina and Chile, you know, before Australia, of course, were Spanish colonies.
You would think that
that they would have introduced it there, but in fact, wine wasn't really introduced by the Spanish that I'm aware of. I think they kind of planted it once they'd kind of got some form of independence. But anyway, but yeah, so Grenache is being planted around the world. The spread in places like California have largely come from you know, it being the like partnership with
Rhone Valley producers.
Probably the famous one is Tablas
Creek
in Paso Robles, who were very closely. They partnered with the Perrin family, who are behind the famed
Chateau de Beaucastel.
Yeah, in Châteauneuf-du-Pape, and they actually introduced all of the all 13 Châteauneuf-du-Pape varieties. And they actually have a nursery, and I think they're commercially available. So people have been planting those Rhone varieties, thanks in some part to them. But Australia has had Grenache for a long time, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it has the oldest.
We definitely have the oldest
in the world.
We have the oldest material in the world, and I think, you know, Australia's been lucky that we you know, didn't really see a lot of phylloxera here, or it didn't hit as hard as how it did in the European continent. So
particularly in the areas that we're going to be looking at today in South Australia.
So we've been really fortunate to have some of the oldest vines of Shiraz, Cabernet, Grenache. You know, I think the first plantings of Grenache was in the early 1860s. And I think they're still on the Cirillo block, the 1860s. But so yeah, we've been very fortunate with Grenache, and of course, you know, it did constitute a major part of our fortified wine production. So Grenache has always been a really important variety in Australia. It's not always been the most fashionable. It's not always been the most fashionable variety, but you know, it's been there, and we're now seeing some really excellent wines coming from incredibly old material that you know, some very intelligent people are making good wine out of.
And I think one of the things that distinguishes Australia from pretty much anywhere else is that although there are a lot of Grenache wines that are incorporated into a blend, classic one being GSM, Grenache, Shiraz, Mourvedre, we do a lot of varietal, as in single variety Grenache wines, and that's kind of what we're looking at today. In talking with the guys from Different Drop about some really great examples, we made the decision that we were going to look at single variety and sort of be able to kind of distinguish subtleties between different sites, different regions, and styles, just looking at that. But of course, Grenache, maybe, I don't know, we've actually got Jonathan and Mattia who are here watching us taste. Jonathan, based in Adelaide, is working with Henschke.
And restaurant manager at Hill Race Restaurant.
Yeah, so you'd be familiar with you know, the kind of Grenache blends we'd sort of see, but also, you know, a number of years ago, before I actually went overseas, went to an immersion program in the McLaren Vale, and again looked at. We did a masterclass on Grenache on its own, and also Grenache blends. So, you know, even within the McLaren Vale, you can get some really quite profound differences depending on which part of the McLaren Vale it is. So I think that's probably a good opportunity for us to actually start tasting.
Yeah, sure. Let's get started.
So we've put them into an order. The four of us have talked about what order we thought would be best to taste it, and we're going to start with, interestingly, an Adelaide Hills Grenache, but actually made by a former guest of the podcast, Brendan Carter from Unico Zelo, and I think he told me that it's actually a part of the Adelaide Hills. It's quite close to the Barossa.
Yeah.
Yes.
I believe so, yeah.
So here we go. Starting off, Unico Zelo, Kersbrook Vineyard, Grenache. The only one.
2014, by the way. This is 14 one.
The only actually, I'll get you to do the honors if you don't mind. Give us some air. The only wine actually not under screw cap today, which is quite interesting. You do, of course, with Australian wines, typically see a lot more screw cap, even with red wines. If you've already watched some of the tasting videos I've done, even wines going back to 2003, I think I've had on the screw cap. So we've had screw caps pretty commonly, even on red wines, for a long time. Adelaide Hills, it's a pretty large area, but it's definitely more known for Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Shiraz.
Slightly cooler, elevated climate.
Yeah. Not known really for Grenache, but I think it possibly has something to do with its particular part of the Adelaide Hills. One of the things that's exciting about Adelaide Hills for me most recently has been a lot of the alternative varieties, Italian varieties, some Spanish varieties, that kind of thing. But here we go. Yes, of course. As we mentioned on that particular episode, definitely go back and listen to that episode of the podcast. I can't remember which episode it was. Hold on, just give me a second. Now, probably, James, you want to just talk quickly about the colour?
Yeah, firstly, the colour is the most interesting thing here because obviously, you know, we see a lot of, especially South Australian wines, we see a lot. It is a really warm climate. We tend to see a lot of dark wines, but, you know, Grenache being a very thin skin variety, you know, this is really looking more like a very old wine. It, you know, it's got this almost sort of amber hue to the wine, and it's. If we can all see that there, it is really light. It's almost, yeah, it looks like Nebbiolo in terms of the colour more than anything else.
It's very lithe. It's not your typical Australian Grenache.
No,
usually we'd expect it to be a little bit darker than this.
Yeah, of course. And look, you know, Grenache does really well with a bit of vine age. It's almost, you know, it's like Sangiovese. The older the vines are, the better the quality of the fruit is. It's so we've always got to remember that. And I'm not sure how old this.
I think it's a pretty old vine Grenache. And it's probably going to be a consistent theme with all these wines. We're talking some really outstanding winemakers, and so they're going to have the opportunity to get access to some pretty old vine material Grenache.
This is definitely, I think, you know, out of all of the wines here, looking at them, I mean, being familiar with some of the wines, this is definitely, you know, you can see there is a lot of winemaking in this one, and this is definitely more stylistically what the winemaker is doing rather than perhaps maybe the
yeah, I think I'm not sure about this one
I think, you know, we've got some whole bunch here, wild ferment, a little bit
definitely.
of
it's 100% whole bunch,
a little bit of carbonic maceration as well, which is not something that we tend to associate a lot with Grenache.
No, I have actually had this one before. I will point out, and I'm a big fan of it. What's your impression of the aromatics of this wine?
Yeah, look, you know, the whole bunch characteristic definitely comes out. It's not stemmy in any way, but, you know, you can definitely see that there is that sort of, I guess, a leafy kind of aspect to the wine. Aromatically, I think, you know, it shows a lot of spice, and that is definitely Grenache down to the T. You see a lot of this, a lot of brown spice, kind of characteristic baking spice sort of notes, and you know, it's a very pretty one. It's definitely quite lifted and aromatic, and it you know, kind of just sits at the top of the glass there, and it's it's very pleasant, but definitely not like a lot of or what we'll see in terms of that sort of. There's no brooding nature in this wine. There's no real dark intensity. It's very light on its feet.
It's intense, but it's not. It's certainly not like concentrated intensity. It's very aromatic. It really does. It's got kind of a floral, you know, very like almost a jasmine, very dried lavender, crushed lavender kind of floral note. How's it looking on the palate for you?
Yeah, good. It's really it's very elegant. There's once again there's a lot of spice in the wine, and you know, the fruit's very delicate. It's very it's really soft and quite plush as well. You know, it's a sort of medium bodied tannins, and
I think the skin contact regime in this wine is quite gentle. You know, you can see in terms of the concentration of the color, it's quite light. even though it has that kind of almost brick kind of color.
Yeah.
The aromatics, I think with that carbonic elements, which is basically keeping it in an anaerobic environment where you're protecting the esters, the aromats of the wine. That's contributing a lot, but it's not being. I don't think it's been worked a lot in terms of pushing the skins or pump overs or anything like that. So this is, I would say that this is an atypical example of Grenache, particularly Australian Grenache. Which I think is partly because it's in a particular area of the Adelaide Hills, but as you said, is more to do with the way that it's made. So, Brendan,
it still
Laura?
definitely shows a lot of Grenache characteristics, you know, and like I always think with a lot of Grenache, you can definitely see that little bit of extra alcohol. It's nice and warming. It doesn't by any way dry the fruit out or make it seem, you know, porty in any way. It's, you know, that's just the nature of the grape variety itself, and yeah, it looks good.
It's a yummy. It's lovely and fresh. It's a good food wine.
It is a good food wine, and it's quite it's quite slurpable, isn't it? Really, it's just, you know, it's quite easy to go down. It's really fresh on the palate. The acidity is nice and fresh, and the fact that it is that slightly lower tannin structure and a little bit more sweet fruited, it makes it a lot easier to have a bottle and then just keep going.
Definitely,
and that's it's good.
Good job, Brendan, Laura. Love it.
It's nice. You can see a lot of individuality in this wine, and this is definitely, you know, the winemaker's stamp on the wine there, and it's good.
Guys,
it's very, very interesting style.
Taste. Okay, so now we are moving on to the Barossa Valley. We're going to start with hopefully a future guest of the podcast, Alex Head. So this is the Head Old Vine Grenache 2014 from the Krondorf Vineyard. Alex really does focus on the Rhone varieties. He is very influenced by both northern and southern Rhone. I think he makes blends. He
definitely does a Shiraz.
A couple of different styles.
Yeah, he does
brown, blonde.
The brune and the blonde.
Yep. And Alex, of course, has been a great supporter of this concept. So thank you, Alex, and I look forward to congratulations on the baby, of course. And I look forward to having Alex on the podcast soon. But immediately, let's talk about the difference in colour.
Yeah, look at it. I mean, you can see it straight away. You don't probably have to line it up next year, but it's, you know, it's that darker, a lot more sort of dark, sort of dark purpley kind of characteristics there. You know, there's it looks miles different to the other one, didn't it?
And aromatically, it's also quite different.
Yeah, this is definitely what we more associate with Grenache. You know, there's a sort of a brooding nature to it. There's that aromatic intensity. There's a darker fruit. You start moving into a little bit more, you know, sort of dark plum characteristics, dark cherries. But once again, you know, it's the same thing. It's that spice characteristic. You always see those lovely spice characters, and this is more fruit spice rather than oak. You know, there's definitely some oak contact in this wine here, and we're seeing a lot of those sort of, you know, vanilla and sort of licorice spice. But you know, you're getting a lot, like I said before, that brown spice character from that we always see from Grenache.
I think this is largely a reflection of the region.
And the
old vine. It really, like, with that older vine, the roots are going quite deep, and so they're really eking as much nutrient as they can out of the soils. And so this is a representation of that warmer climate you have in the Barossa Valley. I'm not sure what the 2014 vintage was like in the Barossa. Alex, if you are watching and you can answer, I'd love to hear from you.
You guys got a vintage note there on 2014 Barossa?
No.
From what I've heard, it was a good vintage. That's in the course of that, all I've heard. It was pretty exceptional. So.
Okay, let's have a taste.
Yeah,
let's taste. This is a bit more expressive.
Yeah, absolutely, and you know,
it has more presence on the palate.
It definitely does, and there's a lot more of that. There's a much more riper attack of fruit to begin with, whereas, you know, the other one, the previous one, the which was
The Unico
the
Zelo.
Unico Zelo, had a much more delicate impact. This one really does come in and hit quite hard from the beginning.
But it's still really beautifully balanced.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's still got a lot of freshness.
there's no
to it.
doubt
It's
about
still
the balance of the
acidity. The tannins are quite supple. They're focused, but they're quite supple. You are seeing that again, like in the aromatic profile. You're seeing that coming through on the palate as well. You're seeing darker fruits. You're seeing a little bit more flesh to the tannins. It does have that darkness, but it is still a really. This is still a slurpable wine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just like that Unico Zelo, it's a little bit different in style, but it's still a really drinkable wine.
And this one, has definitely seen the oak contact. It shows that really old vine Grenache takes very well to new oak. It's really sort of sapped that up quite well, and it's just added that lovely sort of oak-derived sweetness and spice in the wine, which is always something that we associate with Barossa Valley and old vine material.
There's generosity to it, but it's not. But by no means is it sort of over the top and big and blousy.
No, not at all. And yeah, I think really, that slurpable characteristic is due to the fact that these wines are, sort of medium tannin wines.
Yeah. It's delicious. Like
It is
I
really
put the glass down. I want to pick it up again and have another one. So I think this is a this is a benchmark example. I think of particularly Barossa Valley Grenache.
And I think this is a wine that can do well with some really darker, or I guess, with the food, you can set some heavy meats with this one and you can start moving into richer dishes. But, because it's that juiciness that it's got there, and I think you'll see that with the slightly higher sugar weight in the wine, it gives the wine a nice, real sort of plush fruit characteristic. It's just easy to have on its own, even if you don't want to have any food with it.
Absolutely. Good example.
Yeah.
I think this
Well done.
is a good introduction to the Barossa Valley.
Well done. And I will be putting this one on my wine list.
There you go. Evan, if you're watching, get in contact with James.
Delicious. I didn't even want to spit that out.
Okay, we are still in the Barossa Valley, a winery that I visited some years ago, and not necessarily for this kind of wine, more for the Italian varieties. They work with some lovely Italian varieties as well, but they make some really outstanding classic Barossa variety wines, Shiraz, Grenache, that kind of thing. It is Yelland and Papps. This one is the second take Grenache, 2014. A slightly heftier bottle here. I think maybe this is one of their more premium wines. Let's see, 48% whole bunch, wild ferment, 26 days on skins, into barrel for 7 months, 100% French oak, 34% of that new, unfiltered, unfined.
And I've got to have a shout out to my mother for this one, because I actually didn't know anything about Yelland and Papps, and she called me up the other day saying that she bought a bottle of Yelland and Papps Shiraz from Dan Murphy's and was telling me all about it. So I'm getting really excited. It's a winery I've never seen before. I've never seen any of these wines. So to my mum, thank you very much.
So this will be interesting because we are looking at same vintage, and so it'll be interesting to compare the head Grenache as well.
What was the alcohol in the head Grenache over there, guys? Is it 14%?
14.5.
14.5.
14.5. So we are looking at
13.4 here, I think. Is it 13? Yeah, just on the back there, we are 13.4.
Thank you guys for being so precise and not rounding up to the 0.5.
I think this wine is definitely, the aromatic intensity is there. It's similar as the head. There's that black fruit spectrum, but I'm seeing a lot more oak-derived characteristics from this wine. I think that usage of the new oak is just sort of sitting at the top there. But it is a young wine, 2014. You were 34% new oak, 100% French oak. You expect to see a little bit of oak characteristics. It's not a bad thing in the wine. I don't think it's a bad thing at all, because, like we said, old vine Grenache generally does take quite well to oak, but you're just seeing a lot more oak-derived spices from this wine as opposed to the head wine, which was probably a little bit more fruit-dominated.
What I'm finding interesting about this one is that I think the head Grenache, for me, had a little bit of that porty character. It wasn't a porty wine, but you sort of saw that little bit of port note on the nose. This one has a slightly more candied kind of aromat. It's very, very subtle, but it has that slightly more candied red fruit character, a little bit more curranty. than plummy. More, like it actually smells sort of more grapey, if that doesn't sound too stupid. It's a little bit more subtle, I think. It doesn't really jump out of the glass as much as the others. It's possibly a little bit more complex.
I think there's, there is a certain element of savouriness as well on the palate. On the nose here. You can see there's almost like a kind of smoked meat kind of characteristic in this wine. Whereas that head wine was definitely a much more fruit-forward wine. It had a lot of, definitely a lot of that sort of black fruit and spice characters. We're seeing some black fruit, some spice in here, seeing a little bit of red fruit, like that sort of, say, cranberry character.
Cranberry currant
characteristic. And I'm definitely seeing some kind of smoky, meaty kind of notes too. So
this is a little bit sort of light. You sort of can see a little bit less alcohol.
Yeah.
It is more in that savoury element. It's more in that.
I think the lower alcohol. I just had a swig of this, but I think the lower alcohol definitely shows on the palate there. Whereas the head was quite concentrated and definitely was quite a layered wine in terms of its in terms of the fruit. This one here is far more. It's definitely more medium bodied. It feels it lacks that sort of that massive concentration that the head had.
Somewhat tighter tannins as well.
And the wine just
here, maybe you could see that because it's got a little bit less alcohol.
Oh, look, a little bit less alcohol, but I probably think that the vine age as well here is probably a little bit younger for these wines. I think that old vine, in terms of the Barossa Barossa Charter, old vine is anything about I think it's like 50 years. Is that right for the old vine? And then we have.
It says so, like 35.
It says 35 years on there, but I think that falls into the old vine.
That's conservative.
Category. Yeah. Because I think there's the old vine category. Then we have the next one is called the. I know that for everything that's over 125 years is like called centenary vines, and then we have old vines.
You've lost me.
Yeah, it's like a Barossa, but the Barossa Charter basically. That's it's like a listing of.
Did you have you been watching Plonk?
A little bit.
The Barossa episode was pretty funny.
It was pretty good.
It was pretty funny. And it was just cool to see some of the cameos. Like hopefully future guest Tom Schwartz. That was great. So this is a slightly different construction. It's.
Have you got the charter there?
There you go.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, old vines, 35 years of age, and then we have survivors that are about 70, centenarian at 100, and ancestors at 125. That's right. So this fits into. Well, the head wine was definitely in the old vine category. I don't know. I think the concentration and the is definitely, we're seeing younger material here.
I like it. I really like that. I think this is probably a slightly more contemplative wine. Possibly a little bit more food dependent.
Yeah. I think it probably could do with a little bit of food, and it's definitely not as plush or as slurpable as that head wine was.
Mm.
And there's a lot of tension in this wine, which I didn't really see with the other two. This is a really tightly wound wine, and could probably do with a little bit more time in bottle to really flesh out.
No, but this is a great one. Good job, guys.
There's definitely quality there, and I think, guys, for those of you that go out,
important to know.
And for those of you that go out and buy the Yelland and Papps, it could definitely be one to put in the cellar for medium-term cellaring.
Okay, and last one for the Barossa Valley. A bit of a wild card here. I can't remember actually tasting any wines from this winery. Certainly not for a long time.
Don't think I've seen anything from Schwartz wine.
Schwartz. May the Schwartz be with you. The Meta Grenache. Again, 2014. So this is interesting. We are looking at 3 Barossa Grenache wines from the same vintage. So again, screw cap. Here, does it say anything? Meta, an abstraction from a well-known concept. Okay, handpicked wild yeast, 70% whole bunch. 70% this time. Mm-hmm. Also unfined, unfiltered. Fruit sauce, Bethany and Maranunga, which are, of course, sub-regions of the Barossa Valley. Lovely label. I like that green.
Yeah, it's cool.
It's quite stark.
Very sharp.
So I think colour-wise
looks pretty similar to the Yelland and Papps.
It has that. It's not sort of as dark in colour as the
More
head.
sort of ruby, sort of a ruby color, whereas the head definitely had some really sort of inky characteristics and were quite purple.
As far as concentration, I think, to be honest, all three of these Barossa Grenache are quite similar. You know, they're not really dense and dark, and like you can actually see through it.
But I think, you know, that's once again down to the fact that we're looking at, you know, a very thin skin variety here.
Yeah.
So I don't think you're really
You have to really work the.
I don't think you're ever really going to see sort of
tannin.
inky black wines like, say, Barossa Shiraz or some of the Coonawarra Cabernets that we see.
Mourvedre tends to be a pretty tannic variety, so even though usually it's Grenache, Shiraz, Mourvedre is going to be the smallest component, it actually has quite a big impact as far as the color of the wine. But just on a very, very quick smell of this wine, wow, that's 70% whole bunch.
Definitely comes out.
Really jumps out.
Just really jumps out of the glass. This is...
It's a little bit different to the whole bunch influence on the Unico Zelo.
Yeah, the
in this
Unico Zelo
case.
was definitely almost like, it felt like there was it was almost like brown. The stems were sort of a little bit riper. Well, this feels like the stems.
If anything, for me, and I think I noted this the first time I tasted it, it kind of reminds me of Northern Rhone Syrah in that kind of peppery
sort of spice, whereas
Yeah.
this one here looks a little bit more like stems and a little bit leafy and
like dried herbs
Yeah.
kind of character.
kind of basil-y kind of characteristic.
Yeah, bay
Bay
leaf.
leaf.
This is a little bit more, I guess, exuberant than the Yelland and Papps. The Yelland and Papps is a little bit more subtle and restrained. This is has got a little bit more presence aromatically. But fruit profile, we're still looking at that. This one, I think this one probably sits somewhere between the head and the Yelland and Papps. Like the Yelland and Papps had more of the red fruits. The head had more of the darker berry fruits. This one is somewhere in between.
Yeah, definitely. There is a little bit of this is in the blue fruit spectrum.
Yeah.
Definitely in the blue fruit spectrum. And I think this is, out of all of the wines that we've tried thus far, probably take away the first wine that really didn't have a lot of skin contact in that. This looks like, out of the Barossa wines here, this is definitely the lightest of all of them. In terms of the way that it hits the palate, I think this is definitely the most medium-bodied wine out of the last two.
I think for me, this is probably sometimes Grenache or Grenache blends are referred to as an iron fist in a velvet glove because they're quite powerful, but they can be very silky and supple. And this one, I think, is probably the most representative as far as the texture and the structure of the wine. It's very, very supple and silky. Really, really, like, again, velvety. Compared to the other ones, this one seems a little bit more supple in nature. Generosity. Do you feel a bit more warmth in this one?
No, actually, I think I thought actually the Yelland and Papps had a little bit more warmth. I don't really get that kind of warming feeling sort of going through down into my chest. But look, you know, it's a lovely wine. It's definitely a wine that is showing a lot of showing a lot of whole bunch at the moment. You can see it on the palate as well. It's got that sort of structure from the whole bunches, and stylistically, it's just a different style of wine. It's less of a fruit dominated wine and more of a winemaking dominated wine.
It's a bit more brooding for me. I think as far as kind of classic Barossa Grenache, this is probably the closest. Would you agree? Even though it has that kind of quite high whole bunch, probably aromatically less so, but like as far as the presence on the palate, this for me is a little bit more representative of Barossa Grenache.
I really thought that the head wine was probably a little bit more representative of Barossa Grenache. Yeah, this to me sort of represents a new school approach to Barossa Grenache. Okay. You know, with the wild yeast whole bunch characteristic.
Alex, was your wine wild yeast? Tweet me. Okay. Again, like Barossa Barossa Grenache has possibly fell out of favour a little bit. I think it's starting to come back a lot, and it's certainly thanks to wines like these and winemakers like this that we are seeing a resurgence. We're starting to see some newer expressions of Grenache, which is really exciting. But I think there was a period of time where it was a little bit, I don't know, a little bit old-fashioned.
Yeah, and I guess,
less cool.
I guess, it's really hard to stand up against, Barossa Valley Shiraz, really, isn't it? That was the one that everybody wanted to drink and got the most...
and particularly internationally.
Yeah, and was, the most renowned wine that we sort of make. So, really excellent examples of Grenache kind of fell to the wayside in the Barossa Shadow. So
right.
The Barossa Shiraz Shadow.
Okay, so good example, I think.
Good example,
Schwartz. Meta Grenache 2014. So that finishes up our little Barossa sub-brackets. Guys, you want to have a look at that one? And now we are going to look at the other sort of stalwart of Grenache and Rhone varieties here in Australia. Always sort of like competing, I think. Barossa, McLaren Vale, they, as far as old vine, as far as, Grenache, Shiraz, slightly different climate. Here we go. Hold on, Alex. Wild ferment, so 10 Beaumet, then Rhone isolates. So I think it must be a particular strain of commercial yeast to finish. So thank you, Alex, for answering that question.
Thanks for that. Good wine. Good wine.
We're talking old vine. McLaren Vale has slightly different influence of being closer to the coast. So it's a little bit of a maritime influence. And so that's going to play into, no doubt, the character of the wines. But, just like in the Barossa Valley and McLaren Vale, they make the blends as well.
They do.
So
what do you guys think over there? Are you guys trying the Meta?
Very impressive.
Yeah?
Good?
Yeah.
You like that?
Thumbs up for that one. Okay. Good to hear.
Favorite so far?
Still think the head's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's very expressive of old vine Grenache, but
And I said before, that's when I put it down. I'd immediately want to pick it up and having a look at it.
I think
it's one
probably,
that I want to look at in another couple of years as well.
And it's definitely the one that, if we're talking about old vine or if we're talking about Barossa or South Australian Grenache, I think that is really, quintessentially the classic example and what most would really expect. And that's why I think, like Yelland and Papps, the Meta, I think, these are sort of new school coming off the back of the successes from classic style Grenaches. And these are guys starting to do something that perhaps maybe, would be interesting and newer or a different type of Grenache drinker.
Now, speaking of success, our next wine is made by SC, Steve Pannell. For those of you not aware, winner of the Jimmy Watson Trophy at the Melbourne, what do they call it now? The Melbourne Wine Awards, not the Melbourne Wine Show.
That was
for his Adelaide Hills Shiraz.
Was that last year?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was last year. Yeah, it was last year. Because year
Yeah.
before was the Yabby Lake.
The Yabby Lake Pinot.
Yeah.
First time a Pinot has won the award.
Probably one that he has a lot of respect for is this McLaren Vale Grenache. Steve Pannell actually does source fruit from a number of different regions, Adelaide Hills and McLaren Vale probably being the two biggest sources. So we're looking at the 2012 Grenache. Shout out to Sam Hooper if you are watching this episode. So, immediate impression of the color of this wine, of the appearance of this wine.
Yeah, definitely more in that kind of, if we look back at the other wines, definitely looks more similar to the head wine. It's darker. It's got really sort of purpley.
This is what more
rim.
intensity though.
Yeah.
Look, if you look at that concentration, it really is quite.
And, we're seeing some serious staining on the glass as well here, as you can see. Guys, you can see at the back there, my glass is nice and pinkish.
This Grenache was made from 70-year-old dry-grown bush vines.
So this would put it into the, what category was that there? Just the, in the charter, 70-year survivor vines. So we are in survivor vine territory here. Dry-grown bush vines, awesome. Last time I went down to McLaren Vale, I actually saw a really old Grenache vineyard, and it was just amazing to see these things just sort of come up in that, just out of the ground.
It's
Goblet,
amazing
sort of
size.
that goblet-looking kind of vine. Ooh, amazing.
This is more in that inky realm.
Yeah,
It's
and
really
look, you know,
dense and concentrated.
and there's
It's
depth.
not like bombastically, but you see more of that darker.
Yep.
No, it's even beyond plum here.
Oh yeah, this is definitely super black fruit, and it's got that sort of layered intensity on the nose. You can see some black fruits, you can see really dark spices, you can see oak sweetness. This is I don't know. I think this is a pretty bombastic wine.
It's not. I mean, it's not like jumping out. It's concentrated. Let's say it's concentrated. I mean, it could be a reflection of the vintage. I'm not sure. 2012 was possibly a smaller vintage.
But I think this is, a lot of this is coming from really, these are 70-year-old vines. These are naturally low yielding vines. They're going to give you some seriously concentrated fruit. And I don't think that, this is Steve pushing the boundaries of what he can do with it. I think this is just the fruit. This is just concentrated fruit.
In tasting this, it is exceptionally well made because it has those elements that, like particularly old school kind of Grenache and Barossa, McLaren, Vale red drinkers like really, excuse me, quite full, dark fruits, robust tannins. But it's very well balanced. There's still lots of freshness here. It's still not something that's going to overpower food. It's not a showy wine.
No,
it's just a really well made wine. It's not the kind of wine you don't see the oak character in this. That's very well integrated.
Yeah, no, definitely. This is a wine that the fruit has sucked up all of this oak, and it's a good wine.
It lingers.
Long
density. It's got really amazing presence, and the alcohol does not stand out at all.
No,
that's really well managed. 14% alcohol. Wow, this is a cracking example of McLaren Vale.
Very, very good.
One of the things that's interesting about this one is how complete it looks. Sometimes you can see Grenache wines that look, really very exuberant on the front of the palate, and then just sort of don't have a lot of carry through. But this has got really fantastic depth for a single variety Grenache wine. In the same way that Cabernet is often blended with Merlot just to fill some gaps there, Grenache can be blended with other varieties to sort of fill some gaps. This is
but I think as in terms of completeness on the palate, maybe perhaps the tannins are probably a little bit lower than the other varieties, but that sort of fruit is all the way through the palate. There's some lovely mid palate flesh and weight, and it's good wine. It's really good wine, and long length.
You can see why he is such a well-respected winemaker and is winning so many trophies. Guys, have a taste of that. It is a cracker. And lucky last, 2013 vintage. I think the only 2013, just like in 2012.
There is some super staining on that glass, huh?
Yangarra State Vineyard, old vine, another old vine, McLaren Vale, Grenache, 2013, 1946. This was planted, so we are 2015, 670.
Yeah, it's about 7 years.
69.
69 years.
69 years. So
cool.
Pretty old.
Yeah.
Pretty old. Yangarra, I think, are biodynamic, are they not?
Yes, they are.
They are, bang on. I think Philip White is a big supporter of Yangarra, and he's a lover of the biodynamic viticulture. So I think Yangarra was one of the wineries that was part of that immersion tour I had. So
was this the
Meet Your Makers?
Meet Your Maker, yeah, with the helicopter ride and all that.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I did that a long time ago. It was good. I don't know. Do they do that anymore?
I don't know.
Yeah, they're still doing it.
On it now, actually.
Really?
Yeah. How weird is that?
Yeah. That was a really good trip.
David Castro from Cleveland on it.
Oh, yeah. From Brisbane, yeah. He's Brisbane, yeah. Anyway, okay, so this one isn't as concentrated, I think.
Look, there's still some serious concentration in this one. I mean,
compared to the
SC panel, it definitely
possibly is a vintage reflection.
Yeah.
2013, I think, was a lovely, healthy yielding.
We got a
good
good
quality.
vintage. I said you got some vintage notes on 13.
14 was a slightly more challenging one, I think. Well, at least it was in southeastern Australia, in Victoria. Oof. Yeah.
This is much more savoury.
Mhm.
The nose is definitely more savoury in this
It is.
wine.
It's heading into that slightly meatier
Yeah.
realm. You're seeing that kind of almost like a redskin kind of character, like a raspberry,
almost like
Ribena,
almost like a wild kind of raspberry. You know, we're talking like wild fruits here, as opposed to the fresh variety from Coles.
getting some spice and herb elements too. It is really. There's a lot of things going on in this one. I think this is compelling. Aromatically, is very compelling.
Well, look, as far as 2012 was an exceptional vintage, so
There you go.
yeah, so that's probably
I think
why.
that's-
And 13 was not that bad either.
Yeah.
Wine Companion has
Anyone-
rated it as an 8 out of 10 vintage. So
Anyone watching?
thumbs up.
Guys, if you want to possibly help us out and let us know what the specifics.
Alex,
of the vintage
are
were.
you able to tell us the specifics of the 13 vintage and the 12? And definitely, I'm sure you would have tried that SC Pannell wine, so I'm sure you would know. Is that a typical wine of a great vintage?
Wow. This is more of a statement wine, but not in a bad way.
No, not at all. And it's
This is really showing the old wine.
Yeah.
You know,
and this is also
savoury,
showing.
earthy note.
Yeah, and look, there's definitely, I think out of all of the wines here, this one is definitely showing a little bit of alcohol too in this one. And I think that's sort of something that Grenache is, as we know, high sugar content, and it can definitely sort of just go out there and reach really, really high alcohols. This is a wine that is showing some alcohol. It's not imbalanced in any way, but you can definitely see there's a lot more of that warming feeling that's quite big in the mouth.
It's certainly got presence. The tannins are quite generous. Meteor. Okay, Tom. Thank you. Here we go.
Did Tom say something about the vintage?
He did. 2013 was an early low-yielding vintage which produced concentrated flavors much like 2012. There you go. Our Grenache was hand-picked and received via a belt elevator rather than the normal screw hopper. Oh, so sorry, Tom is talking about the
Pannell one.
the panel. These subs are then tipped into a careful regime of plunging and drain, and returns ensued before the wine was sent to older French barriques after about 12 to 14 days. The wine in barrel was kept on the yeast lees for approximately 9 months prior to blending. The wine received no fining, just filtration. Fine, like unfined, unfiltered, I think is a pretty consistent theme with all these wines. I think that these guys don't really want to
Strip anything out of it.
exactly. They want to retain as much of that that authenticity, I guess you could say.
This wine here, I think, you know what? It's a young wine. It is a young wine. There's showing plenty of promise in this wine. There's concentration here. There are some really firm, there are some really ripe tannins in this wine. It's got some meaty characteristics, it's high alcohol. There's some oak, there's some oak showing in this wine. This is definitely something that right now, you really need a big piece of meat with this one, some braised food with it, or leave it in the cellar for a couple of years and let it just, shed a little bit of that youthful exuberance.
How do I do that? Brendan said, read your YouTube chat. I don't even know. I don't know why it doesn't come up automatically.
Are we still live?
Yeah, we're still live. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how this. Oh, here we go. Okay.
Oh, Alex said that he'd
wow.
meet my maker.
Okay, there's lots of. Oh my god.
Whoa. Oh, we've got somebody said that it was a low-yielding vintage.
Oh wow! All these guys watching have been talking to each other.
Hello, guys.
No idea. I'm so sorry, guys. Okay.
If anybody out there,
Brendan said Philip White lives at Yangarra.
Yeah.
Alex said, I did meet your maker in 2001, my first chopper ride. Cheers, McLaren Vale. Brendan said 13 a cracker, 14 very low yielding but awesome quality. Okay, 2012 was a cooler year, a lot more whole bunch because of the hang time. Brendan's lower yields in 12 because of 2011 issues. No energy in the buds. 2013 was dry with heat stress, shorter hang time, but darker Grenache fruit, sweeter flavors. And Brendan said, LOL dorks. So thanks, Brendan.
Thank you very much.
I hope you're enjoying your time out on the road. And we've got Ben Maroney on as well. Thank you for joining us, Ben. I think that's a really interesting place to finish. That Yangarra, I think that order was certainly the finish, the start and the finish. I think they were the best ways to start and best ways to finish.
Absolutely.
Because the Unico Zelo was definitely the lightest, brightest, sort of more aromatic style. This is a much more dense and brooding style. And
well done, Yangarra. This is something that I'll definitely buy and have in my cellar.
That is, I think, definitely a crowd pleaser.
With 5 to 8 years, this will be a stunning wine.
So guys, have a taste of the Yangarra. And then,
favorite for you for the day?
Tell us what your impressions of the tasting were. Guys, do you have any more questions or comments you'd like to share now that I've actually worked out how to see the comments?
You got a favorite for the lineup?
It's hard to go past that panel.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
I love that Unico Zelo. That's a representation definitely of Unico Zelo's style. And you will not hear me say anything bad about the Unico Zelo wines. I love that. They're so unique.
I think
Unico, of course.
If we look at
panel, if that's what you're looking for as far as Grenache, you have got it in.
I think if you've got to find classic Grenache out of that line there, classic Barossa Grenache, Alex, good stuff. That was my one. That was my favorite for the day, and not because you just decided to follow me on Twitter. I really do like the wines, but I think that SC panel wine is real classic McLaren Vale. I think, for any one of you guys studying out there, doing anything quartermasters, WACT, I think these are the types of Grenache that you'll probably see in your lineup, and they, that's a representation of what old vine and just really smart winemaking can do when it comes to allowing the fruit to truly express itself and show us what great Grenache is capable of.
Look, this was a really fun experiment to do. I really want to thank you, James.
Thank you very much
today, guys. Just quickly, what were your impressions of the Grenache wines we looked at? Do you think that we showed a really interesting cross section of different styles?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's some. As you guys basically alluded to, there's a lot of young, modern, those minimal intervention wines coming through, but then the head's just a classic example of Barossa old school, but in a good modern way. And then the SE panel is just a fantastic wine from good old.
It's cracking, isn't it? It's on fire, that wine. It looks good. It looks so good.
Mattia?
Yes, thank you very much for the wines and for being here. And it's good to see what Australia is able to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's good to see what all wines unique to Australia can do. And just to show how Australian wine industry going towards it, because
it is exciting.
Even
I think a lot of these wines are made by really
world-class winemakers,
people who are still just experimenting and learning so much. Every vintage is a new opportunity to learn. But
I think if you look at that, if you look at single varietal Grenaches, there's not a lot of them out there, but that SC Pannell and that head, that they can go up with the best of Rene Barbier's wines, the Clos Mogador, and
that's a big call.
Yeah, but hey, look, the wine's good. The wines are good.
Well, again, thank you, James, for joining us. Guys, definitely head to ESP.
I'm going to have to do a shameless plug. We've just opened. We're ESP at Northcote, right next to the Estelle Bistro.
On High Street?
On High Street. So we are a tasting menu only. So, tasting menus, 7 to 10 courses. Come and say hello, come and try the food and have a great experience with us. And for those of you, our head chef, Scott Pickett, has a show on Channel 9 called The Hot Plate, which I believe is starting tomorrow. So tune into that. And can people follow you on social media?
They can follow me on Twitter at James Dossan. And Instagram? And Instagram,
at James Dossan.
It is at James Dossan, I think on both.
Yeah, I'm on
thank you
both.
very much. Obviously, I really appreciated your
No, thank you very
knowledge
much.
and expertise. And
It's good to be here for the first
talk.
one, and I'd definitely love to come back and do more of them. So to everyone who was listening out there or was watching, thank you very much.
Yeah, and of course, thank you guys for tuning in. If you're watching this on YouTube, thank you for watching this short-ish tasting. I hope you enjoyed it. You can still buy the wines at Different Drop if you go to differentdrop.com and search for Let's Taste Grenache. The 6 wines that James and I tasted today will still be available for until stocks last, I guess. Thank you very much, Different Drop, for supplying the wines today. Thanks to the winemakers who obviously made the wine and tuned in. And if you didn't get the opportunity to tune in tonight, I hope you get to see the video at some point in the future. Thanks, Different Drop, for your support.
Thank you for Plum to these
Thank
great
you, Plum.
glasses. These were good.
Yeah, I think I had the guys at Plum suggest, I told them we were doing Grenache, and they said definitely do the red A, the red B, more for Pinot Noir and Nebbiolo. So I think this is definitely the way to go. Thanks very much, guys, for joining us. And
We'll see you next time.
yeah, cheers.